everybody, welcome to another Once Upon a Pointe where I tell you tales of my time at New York City Ballet. So the last one we discussed was, I believe, which I'll put in a card for you, my first Nutcracker with City Ballet. So we're going to go on from there. So after Nutcracker, we started winter season. And at the time, which is not the case now, which is good, we used to go straight from 6 weeks of Nutcracker directly into an 8-week run of a winter season, which was brutal because especially the core is dead after 6 weeks of Nutcracker. Now I believe what happens is the fall season, break, Nutcracker, break, winter season. So we did the winter season, and I believe I danced that winter season Carousel again, which I already talked about in a video. And I did one of the soloist roles in Stars and Stripes. I was the head of the first regiment, which was very, so not me, cutesy poo, but it was really good for me to do. It was a really good challenge. And it's difficult because you have to, the stagehand throws a baton at you from the wing and you have to catch it. Thankfully, I never missed it, but that was terrifying. So that was my winter season. I believe I did Carousel, the lead in that regiment, and then just some different core parts. So I think it was around January or so. We had heard that Peter Martins was going to be doing a full-length Romeo and Juliet. And casting went up, and I was slated to learn one of the Capulets. Capulets, of course, being Juliet's side, Montagues being Romeo's side. And he was going to, he really wanted a young feel because the characters in Romeo and Juliet are 14. Romeo and Juliet, I believe, are 14. Romeo might be 16, not entirely sure, but Juliet is 14. So the initial plan was to use students of the School of American Ballet as Juliet, to literally be the principal dancer in this ballet. So no company women were going to be Juliet, which we were all kind of like, about, because that was a big ballet. I had just done the balcony scene back in Saratoga, another Once Upon a Pointe, I'll put in a card for you. And everybody was like, oh, you're perfect for this, you're perfect for this. And then we find out that he's not even using company women. But he was using company men as Romeo. And it was going to be Robbie Fairchild, Sean Swazi, Alan Pfeiffer, and there was one more, but I can't remember who it was because they didn't end up doing it. Seth, who I ended up doing it with, as you'll see in a second, was not initially part of it. He was going to be cast, I believe, as Paris. One cast as Paris and one cast as Benvolio. So we went along and Peter started it and choreographed, and I was a Capulet, and we did all the, the guys had their sword training. They literally went through 6 months of sword training just to do all those sword fighting scenes, which again, another video, as you saw, were legitimate sword fights. I mean, scary, actual blades, tossing swords, sword fights. So we were going along, and at one point he had finished Act 1. I believe this was around March, maybe late February at that point, and the ballet was going to premiere in May. So he decided to do a full, complete run-through with sets, costumes, everything of Act 1 on the stage with the orchestra, blah, blah, blah. So we did, and it just wasn't right. It just didn't look right. Something was off. It didn't go well. You could see Peter was getting frustrated. We were getting frustrated. So we ended up, after that week, doing our yearly Kennedy Center tour in DC, which actually the company is there right now. And when we came back, everything had changed. What ended up happening is the first cast, Juliet, who was a student at the school, I think she was injured. I can't even remember what happened, but she sort of got injured. The others were kind of injured. And we heard that Peter had decided to scrap the school idea and bring in company women. And the rumor was going around, who is it going to be? Who is it going to be? So on the board, rehearsal, it said Romeo and Juliet with following. Sterling Hilton, Tyler Peck, myself, and Erica Pereira, along with the student who had still been learning it. So we were like, oh my gosh. So we went into rehearsal and Peter was like, so as you know, you could probably already tell you're going to be, the 5 of you are going to be learning Juliet. Let's start from the beginning. Because he had already done Act 1 and none of us had learned it. So we literally had to learn everything from start to finish. And Sterling was put with Robbie. They were going to be first cast. Tyler Peck was with Sean Swazi. Erica went with Alan, and I went with Zachary Catazaro, who at the time was still an apprentice. I believe he was an apprentice. So we were there, we learned everything, and I was still learning my Capulet spot, which was very odd because typically if you were going to do it, for sure, they would have taken you out of it. So that meant to all of us that we were learning it, but we weren't necessarily going to do it. And at the time, there were 5 of us learning the spot, as I said, but there were only going to be 4 casts. So I'm thinking, well, since I'm still learning my Capulet spot, probably not going to do this. And it was a really, I'll be honest, it was a really long rehearsal process because when, you're doing a new ballet, Peter still had to choreograph the entirety of the second act. And he's working on the first cast, as you do. The choreographer works on the first cast, and the alternates and the understudies stand in the back. So we were literally standing in the back for 6 hours a day trying to learn this thing while he was working with Sterling and Robbie. And Tyler Peck and I were in the back like trying to stay awake. Because when you're doing a new ballet and it's a new choreographic process, it's often very slow, very tedious. And the choreographer can only focus on that one cast. So the other people are in the back like, oh my gosh. So it was really a long, long process. Tyler and Erica and I kind of all bonded at that point because we were just like, oh my gosh. So time went on and he finally finished the ballet. And we were doing principal run-throughs of each act, mainly with Sterling and Robbie and Tyler and Sean. Those 2, Sterling and Tyler, were definitely going to do it. And it was going to be a toss-up between the other 3 of us to see who was going to get the other 2 spots. So at one point, I had been standing in the back for days and days and days. I hadn't been actually running it. Tyler had run it a few times. Sterling had run it a few times. But I had never run any of it. So it was a random Wednesday. And Peter comes in and he goes, okay, today I'd like to see Katie, Act 2, here we go. I had not done a step. Zach and I had barely done the pas de deux because there's not enough room in the back when the first cast is doing it. You want to stay out of their way. This is why, dancers, I'm telling you, if you're an understudy, if you're an alternate, you have to know it because the director could come in the room and go, okay, Katie, Act 2, let's go. And literally what went through my head is, this is your one shot. This is your chance to get cast in this ballet. So we did it. Zach and I, the pas de deux was okay, because actually Act 2 is mostly Juliet. It's not a lot of partnering after the first bit, as you guys have seen in all the videos. And I acted the heck out of that thing. I was going full force. This is my chance. We did the death scene. I was like so in it. And Peter just sat there. And at the end of rehearsal, he went, good, and walked out. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean? The very next day, Alan Pfeiffer comes running into rehearsal. And he's like, you're going to do it. You're going to do it. I said, what are you talking about? He said, they're bringing in Seth to do it with you. You're actually going to get a cast. I don't know how Alan knew this. Alan seems to have always known everything. So he comes, they're bringing in Seth for you, and you are going to do it with Seth. You guys are going to be third cast. And sure enough, in walks Seth, and he's like, well, here we go. And thankfully, we had already done Carousel together. So we knew how each other worked, and it ended up being a really good partnership. But I literally got cast on the one rehearsal of running Act 2 because I knew what I was doing. I'm telling you, dancers, no matter how talented you are, if I hadn't been paying attention, if I hadn't known it cold and committed to it and been like, even if you're terrified, I pretend you know what you're doing kind of thing, I wouldn't have gotten cast. It's not often about talent. It's about that director walking in the room and going, okay, Act 2, Katie, let's go. And I was able to do it. And they literally even brought in a new partner for me because Zach at that point was an apprentice and wasn't ready to do it. So they brought in Seth. He got taken out of his Paris and Benvolio spots. And I ended up getting third cast of Juliet. And it was so amazing. And Seth was great. I mean, he's a phenomenal partner. I felt very confident. So we had extra rehearsals to teach Seth because Seth hadn't initially learned it. So we had to go all the way back to the beginning and teach Seth. And then I remember they were starting to do completes. And I think I've mentioned in videos before, completes are basically full studio run-throughs with everyone. So it got to be my complete. And Seth and I really we'd been kind of working in secret. We really didn't show anyone. And I remember our complete. It was an amazing experience. I think people were kind of like, because that is my thing, the acting bit. You guys know this. I'm never gonna do Tarantella. Like, me doing Tarantella would not be cute. If I'm on a program somewhere doing Tarantella, something's gone terribly wrong. But I can give you a really good Juliet. So I think that was finally when I kind of came into this proving myself, because, you know, as I said in past videos, getting the balcony pas de deux right off the bat, getting carousel right off the bat, it didn't really sit well with the rest of the company, rightly so. But this, I think, finally, once people could see that I could carry this ballet at 18, I was only 18, and I did act, especially in Act 2, and people were like, whoa. I think that's when the company finally went, okay, she deserves to be here, kind of thing. So obviously the casts ended up being Sterling, Tyler, myself, and Erica. So our debut performance finally came, which was May 4th, 5th, something, I can't remember, but it was in May. It was a beautiful performance, but we got to the end, and this is still talked about at New York City Ballet. We got to the end in the tomb scene, and I think I mentioned this in that commentary, that during the death scene where he's partnering, basically you're a corpse. You can't help, you're lying there, you're totally dead weight. Seth picked me up off the tomb, tripped, and we tumbled down the stairs. I ended up on the floor thinking, that wasn't there in rehearsal. Like, literally tripped with me in his arms, fell backwards down the stairs. I cannot help because I am dead. I can't like get up and go, hold on, wait a minute, you know. So I'm literally lying on the floor like, can't help you, dude, sorry. So he has to dead press. It was such a mess. It was a miracle we didn't start laughing. But after the show, Peter came back and was like, I like it, keep it. Because it apparently looked like he was so distraught that he just tumbled over with me. We didn't keep it, too dangerous. But I'll never forget, and they still talk about, do you remember when Seth tripped with Katie down the stairs? Yeah. And it ended up becoming a very iconic role for me. I got an incredible review in the New York Times, which is very rare. I remember them like reviewing all four of us. And, you know, I think at that point when you're 18, you still don't know how hard it is. You still don't really know what you're doing. Had I been a few years older, I probably would have been a lot more nervous than I was when I actually did it. But I'm just so grateful to have had that opportunity and to honestly, to have the experience to be in the back of those rehearsals for a full-length ballet. It's a very tedious process, and it makes you kind of go, okay, do I really want this? Because it's hard when you're not the cast they're choreographing on. It is not fun, guys. It is not fun. And if you want to be a dancer, you will experience that in your career. You'll be standing in the back going, what am I doing with my life? And it is very frustrating, but you have to still do your best. You still have to know it, because then you might get that opportunity, and it became an iconic role for me. So if you can take nothing out of this but that, really take that to heart. Really take it to heart. I know it's frustrating. I've been there. Even in your own ballet schools, if you're the understudy, you are there because they think you can do it, if not right now. You're not just there just to fill up space. They see something in you. They think you could possibly do it at some point. So take it seriously and put your all into it, because you never know. So that's basically that story. Me falling down the stairs with Seth. So that's where I'm going to end today, because I don't know how long this is. But again, I will keep going on with Once Upon a Pointe. I think what ended up happening next, I'll have to think about it. But probably what I'll end up doing next is the first time I did Sugar Plum. So stay tuned for that. If you missed the video on fouettes, it's right down there. You can click it to watch. There is a very, very exciting and special video coming next week, so I really hope you stay tuned for that. I can't wait to share it with you. Love you guys so much, and I will see you soon.